The alien market was full of noise and color. Shouts came from every direction, selling fruits, fish, metal tools, strange glowing items, and creatures inside glass cages. The air smelled like spices and oil, mixed with the scent of dust and heat. Aliens of many kinds moved around, some tall with horns, others with long tails, some floating just above the ground. In the middle of this busy place, one soft voice broke through. But it was not a seller's voice. It was a whisper, dry and shaking. "Please," the voice said, "just a little food for my child." No one stopped. They passed her like she didn't exist. She was small, her body thin and shaking, skin grayish-blue with dry patches, her clothes torn and dirty. She sat on the stone floor near a trash bin, her back against a cracked wall, holding a baby close to her chest. The baby didn't cry. It was too weak to make a sound. The mother's name was Yaira, and she had not eaten in 3 days. She had walked across the city, begging, but no one listened. Some people kicked her, others spat near her feet. Some laughed, saying, "Why have a baby if you can't feed it?" But Yaira didn't answer them. She just held her child tighter and kept begging. That morning, she had tried again, even though her legs felt like sticks. Her voice was almost gone, but she still asked, still hoped. "Please, just a piece of bread," she said to a merchant with red feathers. The merchant didn't even look at her. Another one, an old alien with shiny black eyes, shouted, "Go away, beggar," and pushed her with a stick. Yaira didn't fight back. She lowered her head and whispered, "Sorry." Her child's head rested on her shoulder, eyes closed, lips dry. That was when someone noticed her. Not an alien, but a human. He had short brown hair, a clean jacket, and a bag slung across his shoulder. He had just arrived on this planet 2 days ago, looking for work and supplies. His name was Daniel. He didn't understand the local language well yet, but he understood pain. He heard the whispers, saw the fear in the mother's eyes, and stopped walking. Around him, others kept moving, pretending nothing was wrong, but Daniel stood still. He looked at the mother, then at the baby, and something inside his heart pulled him forward. He walked to a nearby food stall and bought 2 warm rolls. Then he slowly walked back to her. The alien sellers and buyers watched him, some whispering, some frowning. Humans were rare in this part of the city. Kind humans were even rarer. Daniel kneeled in front of Yaira and offered her the bread. She looked up, shocked, not sure if it was real. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Tears welled up in her eyes. Daniel smiled gently and pushed the food closer to her. "It's okay," he said softly. "Take it." She grabbed the bread with shaking hands and broke a piece, putting it to her child's mouth. The baby sucked on it slowly, chewing with weak, slow bites. A tear fell from Yaira's cheek as she watched her child eat again. She looked at Daniel, her mouth trembling, but before she could say thank you, someone shouted, "Hey, you can't feed her. She's a beggar." 2 guards with heavy boots and armor came forward, weapons at their sides. One pointed at Yaira, yelling in the local tongue. Daniel stood up and blocked their path. "She's not hurting anyone," he said firmly. The guards growled. "She's not allowed here." Daniel said, "She's hungry, that's all." The crowd around them started to grow. Some pointed, others laughed, some just watched. "She has no rights here," one alien merchant shouted. "She's garbage." Daniel turned to the crowd and raised his voice. "She's a mother," he said, "and she needs help." A silence spread for a moment, but it was cold, not kind. Then someone threw a small rock, hitting Daniel's shoulder. He didn't move. He looked at Yaira and said, "Come with me." She hesitated, then slowly stood, still holding the baby. Daniel helped her walk, step by step, as the guards glared. They left the market behind. Behind them, whispers turned to insults. But Daniel didn't look back, and neither did Yaira, because for the first time in many days, someone had seen her, not as a burden but as a person, and that changed everything. Daniel helped Yaira walk through the quiet side streets of the city. Her feet dragged, her shoulders shook, and her baby clung to her like a silent shadow. Every few steps, she looked back, afraid the guards might follow. But Daniel kept walking, calm and steady, his arms supporting her without a word. They reached a small building made of dull metal, where Daniel had rented a single room. He opened the door and led her inside. It wasn't much. A bed, a chair, a small table, and a heater in the corner. But it was warm and safe. Yaira looked around, confused, as if the place was too clean to be real. Daniel said gently, "Sit here," pointing to the bed. She didn't move right away, unsure if it was allowed. Then she sat, carefully, like the blanket might vanish if she touched it too hard. Daniel walked to the storage unit and took out a packet of dried fruits and a bottle of clean water. He placed them on the table and pushed them closer to her. "Eat," he said softly. "It's okay." Yaira looked at the food, then at him, then back at the food. She tore a small piece of fruit and gave it to her baby first. The baby's tiny mouth moved slowly, chewing with effort. Only after that did Yaira eat something herself. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed. It had been too long since she tasted anything sweet. Daniel sat on the floor, giving her space, watching in silence. After a while, Yaira spoke, her voice soft and cracked. "You're not from here," she said. Daniel nodded. "I'm human, from Earth." She blinked slowly, then said, "I've heard of humans. Good things or bad?" he asked, half smiling. "Both," she whispered, then lowered her head. Daniel didn't ask more questions. He didn't need to know her full story to know she was in pain. But after a moment, she looked up, eyes tired but stronger than before. "My name is Yaira," she said. "This is Rel." And she gently stroked her baby's head. "She's beautiful," Daniel said, and he meant it. Yaira nodded once, holding back emotion. Then she said, "Why did you help me?" Daniel took a deep breath, thinking, "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe because no one else did." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Yaira said, "Most people here only help when there's something to gain." "I noticed," Daniel replied, remembering the cold stares and cruel laughs from the market. "You made a mistake," she said suddenly, voice tight. "They'll remember you now." "I can live with that," he said. "Can they live with themselves?" Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by his words. "No one ever said that before," she whispered. Daniel stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the distant market lights. He didn't know the planet's politics, didn't know its history or its rules, but he knew this: what he saw today was wrong. Leaving a mother and child to starve while others threw away leftovers. That wasn't culture, that was cruelty. Yaira spoke again, breaking the silence. "My people, they were nomads," she said. "We had no land, no power. When war came, the cities closed their gates. My mate, he went to fight." She paused. "He never came back." Daniel turned and listened. "We ran until our feet bled," Yaira continued. "Then we begged. But no one wanted mouths that didn't make money." Her voice was steady now, almost calm. But her eyes showed the pain behind every word. Daniel sat down again and said, "You don't have to run anymore." She stared at him, unsure whether to believe or not. "I have some credits," Daniel added. "Not much, but enough to keep you both safe for a little while." Yaira shook her head. "I can't pay you." "I'm not asking you to," he said gently. "Then why?" she asked again, softer this time. Daniel looked at the baby girl, then back at Yaira. "Because she smiled when she ate," he said. "And that smile was worth more than all the credits in this city." Yaira didn't speak after that. She just looked at him. For the first time, not with fear or doubt, but something close to trust. Later that night, Rel slept peacefully under a soft blanket, and Yaira sat on the floor beside her. Daniel handed her a warm cup of broth. As she drank it slowly, he thought about the market, the guards, the silence of the crowd. They all watched, but no one moved. Would they do the same tomorrow if someone else begged for help? Daniel didn't know, but he knew this. He couldn't walk away anymore. Because once you hear the cry of a starving mother, it never leaves your heart. And Daniel's heart was no longer his alone. It now beat for a mother and her child. The next morning, the market buzzed again. Vendors opened their stalls, shouting about fresh fruits, hot stew, and rare crystals. No one mentioned the starving mother who was dragged away the day before. No one spoke of the human who stood between her and the guards. They wanted to forget it happened, but not everyone had forgotten. Daniel walked through the market again. Slowly, he carried a small bag of food and a warm cloth blanket folded under his arm. He didn't come to shop. He came to return to the place where cruelty was louder than kindness. Whispers started as soon as he stepped in. "That's the human from yesterday," one alien said. "He fed the beggar," another muttered. "He stood against the guards," someone else added. Daniel didn't react. He walked straight toward the stall where Yaira had been pushed and mocked. The red-feathered merchant stared at him with narrowed eyes. "You again," the merchant growled. "We don't want trouble." Daniel stood still, looking him in the eyes. "I'm not here for trouble," Daniel said. "I'm here for truth." The merchant laughed, a bitter sound. "Truth? What do humans know of our ways?" "I know this," Daniel replied. "A child was starving in front of you and you looked away." The market went quiet. Vendors stopped shouting. Buyers stopped walking. Everyone turned to listen. The merchant snapped. "She was dirty, unworthy, useless." "She's a mother," Daniel said firmly. "And you pushed her like she was trash." A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone called out, "He's right." Another voice shouted, "We're not monsters." But not everyone agreed. One older alien stepped forward, his scales shining dark green. "Outsider," he said coldly. "This is not your home." Daniel looked at him calmly. "Maybe not," he said, "but I won't stay quiet while people starve in your streets." The green-scaled alien scowled. "You think one act of kindness makes you a hero?" he sneered. "I think one act of cruelty makes you a coward," Daniel said without blinking. A gasp moved through the crowd. The tension grew thick like smoke. Some aliens stepped back, afraid. Others stepped forward, angry. Then came a sharp voice from behind. "She didn't steal. She only asked." Everyone turned. It was a young alien girl, barely old enough to work, carrying a sack of herbs. "I saw her," she said. "She never touched anything, just begged." The green-scaled alien growled. "And you believe that makes her worthy?" "I believe no one should starve," the girl replied bravely. Daniel looked at her and gave a small nod of respect. Then, without a word, he opened his bag and pulled out food-warm rolls, dried fruit, clean water. He placed it on the ground in the exact spot Yaira had sat. The crowd stared, confused. Daniel stood and said loudly, "This is not for sale. It's for anyone who is hungry." More murmurs followed. Why would he give away food? Is this a trick? He's crazy, someone muttered. But then, a small alien boy stepped forward, barefoot, with thin arms and hungry eyes. He looked around, scared, then reached out and took a piece of bread. He bit into it fast, crumbs falling, eyes wide with joy. No one stopped him. Then another child came, then an older alien with a limp. They took the food gently, carefully, as if expecting someone to hit them, but no one did. Daniel stood beside them, saying nothing, just watching. The red-feathered merchant exploded. "You're ruining my business," he shouted. "Giving things away like that." Daniel turned to him. "Then maybe business needs to change," he said calmly. More gasps from the crowd, more whispers, but this time not all were hostile. Some looked thoughtful, some guilty, others uncertain. Daniel saw the fear in their eyes. Not fear of him, but fear of change, because change meant facing the truth, and truth was a heavy thing to carry. From the edge of the market, a guard appeared, walking fast, armor shining. The same one from yesterday. He looked at Daniel, then at the food on the ground. "What is this?" the guard demanded. Daniel stood tall. "It's food for those who need it," he said. The guard frowned. "You're disrupting order." Daniel replied, "If your order means letting children starve, then it deserves to be disrupted." Silence. The guard didn't move, didn't attack. He just stared at Daniel for a long time, then turned and walked away. Daniel turned back to the crowd. Some still hated him, some feared him, but some, just a few, looked at him with something new. Hope. And hope, once seen, is hard to unsee. Daniel carried the last empty basket back to his small room. The market behind him was still buzzing, but differently now. Some called him crazy human. Others whispered his name with curiosity. A few just stared in silence, unsure how to feel. But Daniel didn't care about any of that. He had done what he came to do. Feed those who were hungry. When he opened the door, he saw Yaira standing by the window, holding Rel. She turned quickly, worry in her eyes. "I heard shouting," she said. "Was it you?" Daniel nodded slowly, placing the basket down. "I gave out the rest of the food," he said. "People took it." Yaira looked confused. "You gave it away?" "They needed it more than I did," Daniel answered. "And someone had to start." Yaira sat on the bed, rocking Rel gently. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This world doesn't like kindness." Daniel pulled a chair close and sat across from her. "I saw that," he said. "But maybe it just forgot how to be kind." Yaira shook her head. "No, they remember. It's just easier to ignore." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't want to ignore it," he said. "And I won't." For a moment, the room was quiet except for the soft breathing of the baby. Rel slept peacefully, her tiny hands curled into fists, her belly no longer hollow. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. Daniel asked, "What will you do now?" Yaira looked down at her daughter, then out the window. "I don't know," she replied. "I have no home, no credits, no one left." "You have me," Daniel said gently. "For now, this is your home." Her eyes filled with tears again. But this time, she didn't hide them. "You barely know me," she said, voice trembling. "And you've already risked so much." Daniel shrugged. "Sometimes you don't need a reason to do the right thing." Yaira wiped her cheek, nodding slowly. "I want to help," she said suddenly. I can clean, cook, anything you need. Daniel smiled. Let's just start with staying safe. That night, as rain began to fall outside, Daniel cooked a simple stew using dried vegetables and spice packs. Yaira watched him move around the small kitchen corner, her eyes studying everything. She hadn't seen someone cook without fear or rush in a long time. Daniel filled 2 bowls, gave one to her, and they ate in silence, warm and safe. Outside, thunder rumbled across the dark skies. But inside, the little room was filled with calm. Rel let out a soft coo and turned in her sleep. Yaira whispered. She hasn't slept this peacefully since her father left. Daniel didn't speak. He just listened. Yaira continued, her voice soft. He was strong, brave, always smiling. Even when we were hiding in the forests. When they came for him, he kissed her head and told me to run. She paused, her hand resting on Rel's back. I never saw him again. Daniel reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Yaira looked up, her eyes shining with pain but also something else. Relief. No one had listened to her story in a long time. No one had cared. After the meal, Daniel gave her the blanket he brought from the market. You'll sleep on the bed tonight, he said. I'll take the floor. Yaira shook her head quickly. No, I can't. But Daniel smiled. You've slept on stone floors long enough. That night, he lay on a folded blanket, the floor hard but not cold. Yaira and Rel slept in the bed, soft breaths filling the room. Daniel stared at the ceiling, thoughts spinning. He had come to this planet for a job, for money, for a new start, but he had found something else, something heavier but more meaningful. He had found people who needed someone to stand for them, and he had found a mother who refused to give up, even with nothing left. Suddenly, a small voice broke the silence. Daniel? Yaira whispered in the dark. Thank you. He smiled in the darkness and whispered back, You're welcome. Then sleep came for them both, soft as a promise. Outside, the storm passed, and a new day waited to rise. The next morning, sunlight crept into the room through the cracks in the metal shutters. Daniel sat at the table, sorting what little food he had left. Yaira was dressing Rel in a clean cloth Daniel had found in the storage pile. The baby looked brighter today, her eyes more alert, her hands moving with new strength. Yaira kissed her forehead gently, whispering a quiet prayer in her native tongue. Daniel glanced at them and smiled. She looks stronger, he said, pouring water into 2 cups. She feels heavier in my arms, Yaira replied with a soft laugh. That means hope. Daniel handed her the cup and said, Let's give that hope to someone else today. Yaira tilted her head. Unsure. You're going back? Daniel nodded. And I want you to come with me. Yaira's eyes widened. They'll remember me, she whispered. They'll throw stones again. They'll remember you, Daniel said. But this time, they'll see you standing. She looked at her child, then back at Daniel. A long pause passed. But then she gave a slow nod. I'll go, she said. For her. They walked side by side through the dusty streets. Yaira held Rel close, wrapped in the warm blanket, while Daniel carried a small bag of food and an old crate. As they entered the market, the crowd began to hush again. Eyes followed their every step. Some faces showed surprise, others disapproval, and a few wore something new. Guilt. Daniel placed the crate down in the center of the walkway, right where Yaira had sat begging 2 days ago. He opened the bag and carefully placed bread, fruit, and water on top of the crate. Yaira stood beside him, holding Rel, her spine straight, her chin raised. The market watched, waiting. Daniel raised his voice, not shouting, but strong enough to carry. "This is free," he said. "If you are hungry, eat." Whispers rippled through the crowd. A young alien boy walked forward, then stopped, looking around nervously. Daniel nodded to him, and the boy took a piece of bread, holding it like treasure. Then an older alien, hunched and shaking, came next, taking water with both hands. Soon, a small line formed, slow and quiet. Yaira stood silently, holding Rel, watching as those once invisible were finally seen. Then a voice broke the peace, sharp and angry. "You again," spat the red-feathered merchant, storming from behind his stall. "You're poisoning this place with your foolish charity." Daniel stood calmly. "Is it poison to feed the hungry? You're making us look heartless." The merchant barked. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You did that all by yourself." More people gathered now, the whole market pausing to watch. The red-feathered merchant pointed at Yaira. "She's a stain on this ground." "She's a mother," Daniel said, stepping between them. "And she's not alone anymore." Yaira stepped forward too, her voice clear, though it shook. "You laughed when I begged," she said. "You shoved me like I was dirt. But this human gave me food, gave my child safety. Who's the outsider here?" The market grew quiet. Even the guards didn't move, only watching, unsure what to do. Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out another small bundle, tools and herbs. He laid them on a cloth beside the food. "This is from her," he said. "She's offering herbs for trade. She wants to work." Yaira lowered her eyes humbly. "I don't want pity," she said. "I want a chance." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, an older merchant walked forward, wrinkles deep on his green face, his back bent with years. He looked at the herbs, touched them gently, then picked up a small pouch of powder from his own stand. "I'll trade," he said, placing it beside hers. Gasps whispered through the crowd. One by one, others stepped forward, some offering small trades, some just watching, but none threw stones this time. Daniel smiled and looked at Yaira, who was blinking away tears. "You did this," he whispered to her. "They see you now." She nodded slowly, holding Rel tighter. The red-feathered merchant hissed and turned away, muttering curses, but no one followed him. The crowd had shifted, the market had changed, just a little, but enough to start something new. As the sun climbed higher, Daniel and Yaira sat behind the crate, not as beggars, not as threats, but as part of the market, and Rel, warm in her mother's arms, smiled for the first time since her father vanished. The market felt different after that day. Not completely new, not completely kind, but different. Some vendors still frowned at Daniel and Yaira. Some still muttered behind their stalls, but others had begun to nod when they passed, and a few even offered short greetings. Yaira no longer walked with her head down. She now carried a small basket with herbs she collected from the edges of the city. She had nothing fancy, just simple healing roots, dried leaves, and powders passed down by her people. But those few items, shared gently with the right words, had started to bring trade. A pain salve here, a sleeping dust there. Small trades, small hope. Daniel helped her build a cloth sign using old scraps. He wrote in both human and local script, "Trade welcome. No one too small." Every time someone came to her little corner, Yaira smiled. Even when her hands shook with nerves, Daniel stood nearby each day, not guarding, just being there. Sometimes he helped carry things, sometimes he just watched the sky, but always he kept one eye on the crowd, just in case. And one day that caution proved needed. A group of wealthy merchants approached, dressed in sharp robes and polished badges. They weren't here to buy. The leader, a tall alien with silver horns and dark eyes, stepped forward. "This nonsense must stop," he said, loud enough for all to hear. Daniel turned slowly. "What nonsense?" "Feeding beggars," the man sneered. "Turning our market into a pity stage." Yaira stood behind Daniel, holding Rel close. She didn't say anything, but her eyes burned. "People are working together," Daniel said. "No one is begging now." The merchant stepped closer, his voice sharp. "This world was built on order, status, control," he said. "Not human emotions." Daniel didn't flinch. "And what did that order bring?" he asked. "Empty bellies and full trash bins?" A hush moved through the crowd. Vendors looked up from their stalls. Buyers slowed their steps. The silver-horned merchant snapped, "You don't belong here." "Maybe," Daniel replied, "but maybe your kind has forgotten what belonging means." A few heads nodded quietly in the crowd. One young vendor called out, "He helped my cousin walk again with that healing paste." Another whispered, "His food kept my grandmother alive last winter." The merchant's face tightened, his voice low and angry now. "This is how rot begins," he said, "with soft words and broken rules." Yaira stepped forward then, surprising everyone. She placed her basket down, her voice calm but strong. "If kindness is rot," she said, "then maybe the tree was never alive." Her words echoed like a wave through the market. Some gasped, others stood still. The silver-horned merchant raised a hand, like he might strike her. But Daniel stepped between them fast, his hand raised too. But not with a weapon, just ready to stop harm. "Touch her," Daniel said quietly, "and see who truly stands with you." The merchant looked around and saw more than 10 pairs of eyes watching, some angry, some brave. The crowd was no longer quiet sheep. It was becoming something else, and he knew it. With a final growl, he turned and walked away, his guards following. But as he left, he shouted, "This market will regret letting outsiders lead." Daniel stood in silence, listening, then turned back to Yaira, who exhaled slowly, her grip on Rel loosening. "You didn't have to stand in front of me," she said, voice soft again. "Yes, I did," Daniel replied, "because you're not behind anyone anymore." That night, the story spread through the city. How a mother stood her ground, and a human stood beside her. Some called them fools, others called them dangerous, but a few called them something new, hope-bringers. Yaira sat in the room, weaving new herb bundles as Rel played on the floor with an empty bottle. Daniel fixed a broken stool, whistling softly to himself. "We started something," Yaira said suddenly. "Yes," Daniel replied, "something small. But small things grow," she whispered and smiled. Outside, the wind blew through the dusty streets, carrying words and rumors and truth. And truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced. Not by fear, not by power, not even by merchants with silver horns. Because the crowd had seen what kindness looked like, and their hearts had started to remember what it felt like too. Days passed and the market kept moving, but something inside it had shifted, like the wind had changed direction. The vendors still shouted their prices. The guards still watched the streets, and the customers still bargained over fruit and cloth. But there was a new feeling in the air. A quiet question, a soft awareness. It began with little things. A stall once known for throwing away stale bread, now left it in a basket with a sign, "Free if you're hungry." A merchant who once sneered at beggars now offered warm tea to anyone who looked cold. And in the center of it all, beside the old stone wall where one mother once wept, A new stall stood proud and clean. It had no walls, no roof, just a cloth laid on the ground and a hand-painted sign. Yaira's remedies, trade or talk, all welcome. She sat there every morning, her baby beside her, smiling now, stronger every day, and Daniel was never far behind, always helping, always watching. Some days he helped carry water, some days he cleaned her tools, and some days he just stood silently while others learned from her. One afternoon, a boy approached their stall. One Daniel remembered. The same boy who had taken the first piece of bread from his crate. He looked cleaner now, a little taller, but still shy. "I want to help," he said, voice small but clear. "Like you helped me." Yaira gave him a job, grinding dried leaves into powder. He smiled the whole time, proud to be useful, and like that, others came one by one. A widow offered to mend cloth bags in return for herbs. A silent man brought carved wood in exchange for healing cream for his daughter's cough. It became more than a stall, more than a corner. It became a place where dignity was traded, not just goods. But not everyone was pleased. The silver-horned merchant returned once more, flanked by city officials and guards. This time, they had papers and rules, shouting words like permits and market laws. "You're gathering power," he accused Daniel. "Without permission." Daniel stood calmly. "We're not gathering power," he said. "We're building kindness." The official waved a scroll. "You need permission to trade." Yaira stepped forward, holding Rel in her arms, her voice steady. "Then take my herbs," she said. "But you'll have to carry the shame too." The crowd had gathered again, just like before. This time they didn't just watch, they stepped forward. The widow, the boy, the vendors who had quietly changed, the ones who remembered what it felt like to be seen. "We stand with her," said one. "Shut us down too," said another. The guards looked around, uncertain. They weren't trained to fight unity, only chaos. The official cleared his throat, suddenly unsure. We will review this," he said, folding the scroll and walking away quickly. The silver-horned merchant stared at them with cold fury, then turned and vanished into the crowd. The market remained still for a moment, like it was holding its breath. Then someone clapped, slow and steady. Then another joined, and another, until hands from every corner of the market applauded the mother who stood, and the human who believed. That night, back in their small room, Daniel sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. Yaira sat beside him, her hand resting on his. "You started it," she whispered. "No," Daniel said. "You did when you chose not to stay silent." Rel cooed from her small bed, kicking her tiny feet in the air. They both looked at her and smiled. "She's going to grow up in a world that remembers what kindness is," Yaira said. "She already is," Daniel replied. And in that quiet moment, the wind outside carried something new. Something lighter, something warmer, carried the sound of change. Because sometimes, all it takes is one meal, one voice, one brave mother, and one stubborn human to shake the heart of a world. And the market, once cold and cruel, would never be the same again.